Good afternoon. I would like to call to order the November 14th, 2023 Little Rock City Board of Directors special call meeting. We would like to welcome those in attendance as well as those watching at home or streaming online. Madam Clerk, if you would, please call the roll.
Director Miller.
Here.
Director Richardson. Director Peck. Director Hines.
Present.
Director Lewis.
Here.
Director Wyrick.
Present.
Director Campiris. Director Phillips. Director Adcock.
Present.
Vice Mayor Webb. Mayor Scott.
Present. We'll now have the invocation from Director Wyrick.
Thank you, Mayor. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, and thank you for allowing us to meet in this public forum. Everybody on this board, including the mayor and the people in the audience, are here to serve the city and make sure that they get all the resources that they could possibly have. We thank you for all of our policemen, all of our firemen, all of our city staff, and I pray that they be safe. And we ask that you take each one of us into your heart and help us make this a better city. These things we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. May we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll now enter to a public hearing for item number 1. Madam Clerk, would you please read the item for the second time?
An ordinance to establish and lay off City of Little Rock property owners multi-improvement improvement district number 2023-003 of Little Rock, Arkansas, Carter Lane Improvement District, to declare an emergency. Second reading.
Move to suspend the rules and place on third reading.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Mayor, that you don't have enough votes to go to second reading.
Because Director
7.
Phillips, he's on his way.
Yeah, but he's not here, and it takes 8 votes to go to second reading.
All right. We'll go to a third reading as soon as Director Phillips gets here, and we'll close this hearing and then transition into the agenda meeting, or portions of the agenda. We'll go into the Nurse Practitioner Week proclamation. I ask Ms. Green if you approach the podium. I'm going to read, and anyone else who may be with you. Vice Mayor Webb. All right. Today we're going to be highlighting Nurse Practitioner Week. I'm going to read alongside Vice Mayor Webb today's proclamation. Whereas nurse practitioners play a critical role as trusted providers of health care for patients in our city and state, and advanced practice registered nurses are highly skilled practitioners with advanced education and clinical training, building upon their initial registered nurse preparation. And whereas nurse practitioners work to expand healthcare access in underserved communities, end health disparities, and combat systemic racism in healthcare, as well as promote health equity in care and improve health outcomes for all. Whereas nurse practitioners provide high-quality primary care, primary, acute, and specialty health care services while emphasizing health promotion, disease prevention, health education, and counseling, guiding patients to make smarter health and lifestyle choices every day. And whereas the confidence that patients have in nurse practitioners' delivered health care is evidenced by the more than 1 billion visits made annually to nurse practitioners across the country. And whereas more than 5 decades of research confirms the high quality of care provided by nurse practitioners, and whereas better utilization of nurse practitioners through modernized state laws and improved policies creates better healthcare through a more accessible, efficient, cost-effective, and high-quality healthcare system. Now, therefore, I, Frank Scott Jr., Mayor of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, do hereby proclaim November 12th through the 18th, 2023 as Nurse Practitioner Week. Thank you. Whoever wants to speak. Yeah, sure. But you want to speak first? You got to speak.
We have to speak. Well, thank you, Mayor, for this proclamation. Certainly, we appreciate the recognition that Little Rock is giving us. We are here to help provide our services and help provide access to care for patients across the great state of Arkansas. Thank you for recognizing this in Little Rock.
Thank you. I guess we're going to do this. Vice Mayor Will.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now enter back into the public hearing. There was a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Motion to suspend the rules and place on third reading.
All right. Is there a motion? Is there a second?
I'd second that.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Third reading.
An ordinance to establish and lay off City of Little Rock Property Owners Multipurpose Improvement District number 2023-003 of Little Rock, Arkansas, Carter Lane Improvement District to declare an emergency. Third and final reading.
Members of the board, we've had 3 readings. We have a few residents who would like to speak. Then we'll go to Director Compuris. We'll come to you first.
Oftentimes when we vote on things and talk about things, what we're voting on and what has happened don't match in my situation, in situations. And this is one of them. We're voting on making an improvement district where they can pay for improvements, correct? But what they have done by facilitating this is, I think, impinged on and violated the property owners that are next to them. And I don't know how you reconcile that situation. We're going to leave long-term property owners and citizens of our community worse off because of a development next to them, and we're now facilitating that by letting them having the ability to raise money to make the improvements on that district. And there's something inherently wrong about that. And I know, Tom, you're going to tell me that the two things are true, and unrelated. And I know that. And I will end up voting for this proposition. But I think that we have to look ourselves squarely in the eye and say, is this really what we're supposed to be doing as a city and a board by facilitating hurting existing neighborhoods to propagate another neighborhood? And that's what I'll say about that.
All right, thank you. Former City Director Michael Keck. Okay.
Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I have written, rewritten, thrown out about a gazillion things I'd like to say. Before I start my remarks, I would like to, first of all, thank all of you that have taken the time to listen. I want to dispel the rumor of the fact that Director Hines has not blocked my calls. I have called him enough to where he may want to, but I have appreciated him and the availability that he has. Mayor, I've got a great respect for you and the work that you do as our mayor. For each of the board members, Vice Mayor, you and I have had the opportunity to work on a number of issues, and I greatly admire and respect you for the work that you've done. Director Lewis, I have not had the privilege of working with you, but this board needs your energy and your perspective that you're giving. Lance, 13 years ago when I said, Director Hines, when I said it was time for me to leave, I knew you were the right guy to be in the spot. And you have done nothing to disappoint that expectation. Director Phillips, I haven't had the opportunity to work with you as much, but I enjoy your postings, and you always make me think, laugh, and I think some point in time you and I would enjoy an evening listening to some music and having some good conversation. Director Miller, you have always been someone whose wisdom has shown through in situations, and I have always enjoyed opportunities to work with you. Director Richardson, although he's not here, should be recognized because when he and I served together, there were some things that took place at City Hall that were recognized nationally for what took place in our city and making sure that young people are safe and have opportunities to grow and to learn right here in our city. And I'll always be thankful for his work. There's a reason why in my time at service at City Hall, they only allowed me and Director Wyrick to sit together one time for one term of 2 years. And that's because I think we enjoyed it too much. On the other end of the spectrum, I did receive a meritorious award for spending more time seated next to Joan Adcock than anybody else in the history of her service at City Hall. I learned a lot from Director Adcock, and I appreciate Dr. and Director Compuris in both roles for his ability to see things strategically and from a large, from a tremendous amount of objective oversight that needs to be done. And just about the time I think I don't need to be reminded of my service at City Hall, I like to click on one of the meetings and listen to Susan Langley and how she says Arkansas. There is absolutely nothing like it. I will be brief in my remarks. I will not use the PowerPoint. One of the things I've prided myself on was I knew how to count votes when I sat where some of y'all are seated. I do think there is a policy discussion that needs to be made. I want to strongly advocate for that. What is being funded with this improvement district is not what was approved by the Planning Commission. It's not. There were major modifications to where at the end of the day, there is now a property that is adjacent to mine that is 4 feet higher. I knew 17 years ago when my wife and I purchased this house and moved our family to this location, I knew what was zoned behind me. I never anticipated that it would be elevated 4 feet above mine. When this came before the Planning Commission on the 21st of June, I did express concern and objections at that time because of flooding that had been taking place in Madison Valley with my neighbors that lived down at 12, 14, and 16, and sometimes up to 18 Hannah. I advocated for a coordinated effort with the different property owners to handle potential stormwater. It passed. I didn't think anything else about it until March of this year, when my backyard began to flood, when my neighbors to the south of me began to experience flooding, when my neighbors that lived to the north of me began to experience flooding. And that's when I learned that what took place in June of 21 that was approved was modified administratively, and it's not what's being developed. So I thought back to the playbook whenever I was at City Hall. But you would encourage us, Director Adcock, you would always encourage people, have you met with the developer? And so I contacted the engineer and the developer, and it was obvious, and I appreciate his perspective and I respect it. He wants to build what the city has approved. And you can't fault a developer for wanting to do that. In May, I had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Collins, Mr. Honeywell, other members of city staff, and Bruce Moore. We walked the property. We showed them where the pipe was the ditch, that the water was being conveyed by a new berm that carried a pipe in it back to the stream. And we talked about a hill cut that doesn't show on anybody's plan. The board earlier this year made a decision for this to go back to the Planning Commission to make sure that this didn't have a negative impact on public health, safety, or welfare. And this project did not receive the support of the Planning Commission at that time. Questions continue to be given about what's taken place on the creek. And in fact, while there may be an agreement about the flow of the water, there's a lot of questions about the conveyance that's there. And so here's what I think needs to happen. Obviously, you need to vote on this. I understand the perspective of the city attorney. But I think also the policy that needs to happen is we need to have the availability, either through state law or through city policy, for there to be a clear understanding of what's being funded and how does it compare with what came through the Planning Commission if it did. This is not the same. It's residential housing. It's 15 lots. There's a commitment from this developer to build high-quality homes. We need these here in Little Rock. But the ditch, the berm, and the hill cut specifically are not there in that plan that was passed by the Planning Commission. They're not. They have been allowed for reasons, some related to the creek, some I have been under the impression that as recently as a meeting last week with Mr. Collins that there was administrative approval for a hill cut that goes for about 450 feet and in some places is probably close to the limit of 10 feet high. Maybe not, but close. But you would think something that was almost 450 feet in length would require a little more approval than what's taken place for this. And here's the other thing. I have nobody to appeal to legislatively. Neither I nor my neighbors can complete this process by going to the Planning Commission, the Board of Adjustment, or an appeal to this board. There's nothing there. The other thing that's interesting is there is a moving definition on the stormwater drainage plan for this project as to whether it's final and approved. And at one point in time, I guess maybe it was. I don't think so. I haven't seen a copy of it. I haven't seen one with a signature and a stamp on it. It may exist. It hasn't been shared with me. But we're funding something that the stormwater drainage plan is still in process. And to me, the way this should go and what I think is reflected in code is that when something comes from the Planning Commission, it's reviewed and finalized by staff. And then there may be minor adjustments that occur along the way. But what has taken place between what was approved by the Planning Commission and then was taken to staff and what continues to be modified, I don't understand how it can be considered final while it's still being reviewed. I still have not found in municipal code where someone in developing their property, the city can allow them to elevate the property without any notice, without any avenue of appeal, without any opportunity for corrective action within a legislative body, either the Planning Commission, Board of Adjustment, or a direct appeal to this board or anybody else. It's not there. There's no place for me or my neighbors to go in regards to to the ditch that's proposed back there. I am most appreciative of the efforts to improve the ditch to a concrete swale. I think that's an improvement. But again, it's different than what was committed to by the engineer on behalf of the developer and was supported by staff. And I understand things change. But when things change, they begin to impact people that are in adjacent properties, that at some point in time, I and my neighbors should have been notified, and we were not. Lastly, I greatly respect what this developer is wanting to do, and I'm glad he's doing it right here in Little Rock. We need more people to buy homes here in this city. Heck, when I served at City Hall, that's something we tried to do more and more of. And we did a pretty good job of it. But here's what's different. And here's what I wish could be taken into consideration. At the end of the day, when this transaction is finished, the developer has stated that he will sell each of the lots to high-quality builders. I have no doubt that he will. They will issue bonds for this improvement district. They will make their money as you would want anybody to make on their project. But me and my neighbors get to live with what was behind. And there is a lot of uncertainty in regards to what's going to happen in regards to the stormwater drainage, first of all. And then secondly, there is nothing that has been stated, that has been offered, agreed to, or is willing to be done that would protect me and my neighbors that are impacted by property that is adjacent to us that is 4 feet higher than ours. So tonight, I marked that I said vote against it. I'm against this, and I am against this. But I understand where you're at. I want you to vote in support of this improvement district because they have fulfilled the requirements of what law states you need to do to have an improvement district. But as you approve this, I strongly encourage this board to find ways to where this doesn't happen again. Because with me, it's property that's 4 feet higher than mine. The next project that may come along, it may be a decision to move a building that's a multifamily building. It may be a decision that fits within what would be considered technically acceptable, but could significantly impact those around them. Mayor, I appreciate the time. I appreciate each one of you and your service. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, City Director Keck. We do appreciate you. We'll now go to Mr. Bob Harden.
Thank you, Mayor Scott, Board of Directors. I represent The Struggle is Real, LLC, the owners of the property, in regard to this petition. And I do want to I think I've communicated with the mayor today about the correction on the proposed ordinance, and I pray that that will be corrected, okay?
It has been.
Thank you.
For the benefit of the board, there was language in there about sewer, and that really isn't a part of this, and so it was deleted.
So I think as the city attorney has mentioned before, the purpose of this public hearing is to determine if in fact the signer of the petition owned the property. American Abstract has signed a certificate which was filed with a petition that says it does. There are the present owners that it will indicate here and can, if you choose, testify that they do in fact own the property through this entity. So we believe that the requirements of ownership have been met. In addition, the title indicates that there was a mortgage on it and that the lender has in fact approved and has no objection to this and signed a certificate that it has no objections. So all the statutory requirements for formation of the district have been satisfied. Now, I will also note that the city has had a stop order on this construction on this project since June of 2023. So there has been no construction. And to that aspect, I assume Mr. Keck has quite a bit of power in terms of persuading this board. In addition, there are legal things that he can do if he objects to this ordinance and can pursue an action in court if he so chooses. So he is not without powers, any individual. I do think that as I've indicated, I hope the city attorney has already advised you that your duty is to determine ownership and to pass the ordinance, and we respectfully appreciate you doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harden. Casey Ingram, Mr. Casey Ingram.
Mayor, city board members, I'm one of the owners of what seems to be the most problematic piece of property in West Little Rock. A couple things that Mr. Keck said, I don't know, they're as truthful as what they came out to be. We've several things that he mentioned that were not a part of the original plan were things that the city planning department wanted us to do, which we did at our expense, the berm, the ditch. So those were items that, yes, they were not on the original plan, but they were asked of us to do, which we did. Secondly, I think his neighborhood, Madison Valley, has had issues certainly that predates us taking ownership of this property in September of 22. I've got two reports right here that the city hired out to two different engineering firms trying to figure out ways to fix Madison Valley drainage problems. One of them is dated May of 2014 and the other August of 2019. So clearly there was a problem with flooding in his neighborhood prior to us taking ownership or moving the first piece of dirt on our property that abuts his. So I just want everybody to keep that in mind as well. This has been a known problem. I mean, I think there was even a tax bill done back in 2011 that money was supposed to go to Madison Valley drainage issues that never happened. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ingram. Mr. Lee Maris. All right. Director Phillips and Director Computers, is your hand still up?
Sure. In for $1.
You took it off now, but.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the people who spoke. Just for completeness for the audience and the board, I was going to ask a question to our city attorney, Mayor, as it relates to the legality of the improvement district. There's a lot of conversation about what we can't do, or should or shouldn't do. So I just kind of want to, just so we're all on the same page here, if our city attorney can speak to the process and the legality as it relates to approving this improvement district.
Improvement districts are created by petitions of the property owners. If they get sufficient signatures of the owners of property, and it's typically a percentage of the overall property, then the action can pretty much has to be approved by the board to create the district. Assessments are then determined based upon the improvements being completed, and those assessments run with the property as if it was a tax. It's not really a tax, it's a levy. If you've got a development that has not actually come to fruition yet, they're pretty easy to start because usually you only have one or two owners, and so you only need one or two signatures. If you have a property or an area that you're trying to create that now has 252 homes on it, it's not that you get 127 signatures from property owners. You've got to get a majority in value of the property, except there's so many different types of improvement districts. There may be one or two out there that just the majority of numbers is what you've got, but most of them are majority in value of the property that's available to sign the petition. If that is done, and if they are the owners, then the governing body has little ability to deny the creation of the improvement district.
Director Phillips.
That's what I needed. Thank you, City Attorney. Thank you, Mayor.
Director Comperius, then Director Hines.
Again, to the gentleman that just spoke, legally, you're on great ground. Morally, I think you have left your neighbors in worse situation. And the two issues, unfortunately, are not coupled. What we're voting on tonight is approving an improvement district that you legally can apply for, and I'm going to vote for letting you do it. But the question I think that has to be asked of you and the city and our staff is, did we leave a neighborhood, well-established neighborhood in our city, better off because of your development or not? And after going out there, I would say they're not better off. So thank you.
Director Hines.
Thank you, Mayor. Tom, and this begs the question, I'm in the unfortunate position of having friends on every side of this deal and trying to intervene and mitigate the issues that we thought would be fixed by future development have not exactly happened the way I would have imagined. And like I said, we will vote for this to pass it. But my question is what recourse is there if someone thinks, I know if you're a developer and you've pulled a permit, if you think staff has exceeded their authority or doing something, you've got the Board of Adjustment, but where is the general public left when they feel staff has exceeded their authority administratively on approving things?
If you're talking in terms of a planning issue, and you think that the planning staff, for example, has exceeded its authority, or the Public Works staff has exceeded its authority, then you look to the ordinances. If the ordinance needs to be amended to clarify that point, you amend the ordinance. If you're looking to the creation of an improvement district, you really don't have a whole lot of a way to go. I mean, what happened in this one, and the reason it didn't initially get approved or come up for approval in June, is that the General Assembly amended the statute, this particular improvement district statute, or subchapter of statutes, and put a provision in there that clearly said if an improvement district is in two cities and would have an adverse impact on motor vehicle or pedestrian traffic, then there would be freedom to deny it. The whole chapter, and this is where Mr. Harden and I disagreed, the whole chapter says that you're supposed to read the whole chapter together. So that's how I read it, because I didn't think it made any sense to be able to have an improvement district create traffic or pedestrian traffic problems in two cities and do something about it, but you couldn't do it if it was in one city. and I don't think you read statutes to a nullity. But again, the answer as to what cities can do with improvement districts and such of that nature, that's a legislative matter for the General Assembly. It's not an ordinance modification for this board.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Vice Mayor Webb.
Thank you. And to follow up on that question, first of all, I agree with Director Compuris 100%. But when Director Compuris first spoke, he talked about making sure we avoided this in the future. So I want to ask the city attorney if that is even possible, if this is a General Assembly issue and there's nothing that we could do by ordinance that would allow us to avoid this in the future.
Director Webb, I think there's two things that can be done, and I've mentioned this to a couple of you. One of them is deals with drainage, and that is a big issue and a big policy question, so I just could have mentioned it and pass on quickly. But we've got drainage easements within the city. We have drainage situations set up within the city that how they're set up and how they look on paper are maybe not how they are in reality. And the better example of that one, not this one, but the better example of that is you've got a drainage easement that's the alleyway essentially between sets of houses, and you expect the people to take care of the alleyway, but nobody's in the alleyway, and now trees have grown up and other things, so that when it rains, water is not drained, it's blocked, and it ends up flooding yards. I think the long term is y'all really need to look at what's going on in drainage in Little Rock, not what the plan says, but what's actually there and what we need to do. That's one. The second thing that we keep hearing, and I'm not in a position, I'm not an engineer and I'm not a planner, but the question that Mr. Keck, I started to call him director again, and he comes from, he went to Texas Tech in Lubbock, my birthplace, so I have a special fondness for him. But although Lubbock is the place you only want to see in the rearview mirror, I've been told. But in any event, the concept of what is an administrative change may be something that the board wishes to look at, because that would be an ordinance thing. If, generally if you say 5%, 10%, 20%, that's one thing, but you can't really say that throughout the city, because 5% on the side of a hill is still probably not something you can work with. And those things have to be massaged. But I think that would be one thing the city could work with. One of the directors before the meeting asked me, well, it complies with Richardson and we're bound by that. Well, what Richardson says is that if you have a preliminary plat that meets the standards, then you have to approve it. That's what that case was about. You can't put anything else in there. It didn't say that you can't look at what you think the standards are and say at this point it doesn't meet it. You're going to need to move a road 200 feet to make it meet the master street plan. That's not an administrative change. That's a significant change. Those are the types of things that the board can do. Now, I can't sit here and tell you everywhere that needs to be done, but I can tell you that the concerns about what's administrative and what's not are there. And I ask you to remember, I've been around with the city for a while, and there have been many times we've had developers come in and say, I'd like to do this, but the process is too hard. And so there's been a big push by the city of, let's make this easier to do. Let's make it easier to build. Let's make it easier to do these things. And that's where discretion gets given, and then it gets exercised, and then you catch a case where, well, no, wait a second. But in fact, all the staff is doing is fulfilling what at one point you said you wish to have done, and maybe now y'all want to say something different.
And before we get there, because I like Director Hines, have the convenience of having friends on every side of this issue. And then secondly, I've been on the other side of the issue as a banker dealing with customers who have been going before the city board in situations like this. And the city attorney is definitely correct from a standpoint of We want to grow more households in the city of Little Rock. That's how we grow as a city. However, as Director Computers has shared, when we do that, we need to do it in a very strategic growth pattern that does not harm our neighbors and existing household owners. The situation that we have before us, and many times today, some may be up in arms about it. Tomorrow, next week, it may be, today we have the resident who's up in arms. Next week, it may be the developer. And the situation really is, as City Attorney said, it gets really murky when you start messing around with a lot of these ordinances, because then it prevents more growth in our city and complaints about how it's hard to work with our city. But in the same vein, we have to do what's best as well with our existing residents and neighbors, that we do not cause harm. So it's a balanced approach. What we see today, and then secondly, we've seen instances where there are too many things that get outside the walls of the rules and the regulations that have influence on the rules and the regulations that then land us in lawsuits, like the Richardson case. And we have to be very knowledgeable of that as fiduciaries of the city. So I think one thing that we can do, Director Hines and Vice Mayor Webb, we really need to drill down from a research perspective, what's minor and what's major when it comes from an administrative standpoint. And so what we'll do is start looking at that process from an independent standpoint with the pleasure of the board. That may come with the cost, Director Hines, but I think that's what we probably really do, is have an independent study on what's minor and what's major, and that can serve as a guide to staff within the administrative authority. Because we're here today on this one issue, I can promise you we'll be here next week on another issue that's where our developers may be up in arms. And so we got to have this balanced approach to achieve strategic growth. But I definitely want to confer with Vice Mayor Webb and Director Hines, as well as Director Phillips, who is very knowledgeable on planning. And when we get this independent study, we'll pull together an independent study group that'll include members of the board, and I think we can come to at least some type of pathway. Director Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to say something similar, so I appreciate you and I being on the same page. But I want to be respectful of the request I thought I heard from Director Keck, which is that we have a policy discussion on this issue. So in light of what you just said, I think after we do those things, we schedule a policy discussion to actually talk about the findings of that report. So as we try to balance these things going forward, we're on the same page as a board on what's the best way forward. So I was going to suggest that we have a policy discussion at the conclusion of that study.
We'll do it. And again, at the pleasure of the board, we'll have to go through a bidding process. I don't see this being something exhaustive, but I think it's worth the investment for long-term effects. And we'll do this independent study, but also want to get Directors Hines, Vice Mayor Webb, and Director Phillips input as we kind of build this independent study, so we're going after the right things, and you guys have enough experience that you would know certain things you want to make certain that not only is addressed, but it's highlighted in the research process. Director Computers, your hand still up? Or you didn't take it down? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it.
Mayor.
Well, now close this hearing. Oh, well, there's an emergency clause?
Yes,
Well, now-
there is.
All those in favor of the emergency clause, please say aye. Oh, hearing back open. All those in favor of the emergency clause, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it.
Motion
Hearing
to adjourn,
closed.
Mayor.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it.
Motion to adjourn, Mayor.
There's a motion second to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, meeting adjourned. We'll now enter into our agenda meeting. We've already gone through with the nurses' presentation. Members of the board, are there any questions on items 1 through 13? Allie, can you show the pictures of some of those parks improvements? I think Leland may have sent that to someone. Did they not come in? If they haven't come in.
On the agenda.
They're
They're linked on the agenda.
linked on the agenda, okay.
I hadn't looked since this weekend.
All right.
On the board communication.
Awesome, they're linked on the agenda.
On the-
Director Computers, is your hand up?
No.
Okay. Director Adcock?
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
okay. I have a question on item 2, please. Is
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Howard here?
Yes, ma'am. Your question?
The question is, do we own these lots, and how did we get these lots?
We'll have Director Howard come up.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we own the lots that these houses are being built on in 2 and 3, or are they coming from the nonprofit?
They're coming from the nonprofit.
Okay, so they are the ones bringing the lots to us, and we're just providing the funding?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Director Hines?
Yeah, this is on 14, Mayor, or 15, I'm sorry.
All right, we'll come back. Director Miller?
Thank you, Mayor. Director Howard? I just had a quick question on this. When we approve CHOTO funds for development of housing, do we have any type of time period in which these houses have to be developed?
Yes, they have a 2-year period per the contract.
It's 2-year period?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Director, we'll now transition to items.
Mayor, just real quickly, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was going to ask Ally to show the images on the screen. I just want to show it because I think this is good work that we're doing. I know a lot of our residents reach out to us about our investment in our parks and our community centers. So I think these pictures are worth, spending a minute or two just so our community can see the work that we're doing in each area. I don't know if Director Couch is here to maybe speak to him briefly. Is he here?
I think he's en route of
Okay.
another meeting.
5, 6, and 7. I just want to make sure our residents know that these are high-quality improvements to our parks, and I just want the visual for those who are watching and in attendance.
All right, thank you so much. Everyone's received the visual. Director Hines?
Yes, I'd like a presentation on Ordinance 15, especially the reasoning behind the building height going, I think, 225 feet is a by right use. Got some serious questions about community engagement and what that means for downtown.
All right, Director Collins?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board, Director Hines. The reason behind that is we was approached by several developers in the area about modifications to the UU district, and especially in regards to the mix of uses and how it relates to the height. One of the prominent things, and so staff reviewed it, and one of the prominent things in UU, and I would I'm going to read from the ordinance as it stands right now, and then also some of the stuff of the amendment. The general purpose and intent of the UU, it's to be consistent in the urban form, but one of the key is the urban use district is designed to help create a compact, dense, distinguishable core area. And when this got established, it worked to do that. There were several larger buildings, taller buildings that went in, but then to really get the maximum, and that is the maximum height, 225, that you can do in the UU height, it was tied to the use on there. So as a developer come in and done their mixed uses, then you got credits for additional height. So one of them is if you provide a minimum of 20% of the gross floor area for residential uses, they're entitled to add 28 feet to the structure. And then there's other uses. Of course, we didn't change in the deal, so it's talking about Central Arkansas Transit Authority, that you put that in. A mass transit stop, then you can add another 14 feet. And so if you get these different mix of uses and amenities put in, then you get benefits to add additional height. So all this amendment is doing is recognizing that that is the maximum height, and actually pulling the city away from ascertaining what those mixed uses are and allowing the developer to choose those uses in those buildings regardless of the percentage. So we would get out of the mixed use business as far as determination as it correlates to the height, and allow the developer to choose what they need to choose for the benefit of the development to do that. Like, for instance, we've had just recently, it really started happening a little bit before the pandemic, but has continued in the downtown core, or our UU, that office space has reduced. You know, we can all talk about the Bank of America building, that office space has reduced. And then we've been approached, and I think people at this board has been talked to about maybe making that a residential use, apartments, condominium style. And in doing so, if it's stuck with this type of residential in the UU, they would have to also put other measures in there to get their max height, or if they wanted to rebuild, and it may have to go as a planned development to do so. And this would remove all of that. It would allow them to, with that existing height building, go through and look at the different type uses that they would like to put in to grow this development for that particular building if they choose to do so, and any new development. So that is the reasoning why we chose to remove that. There was nothing more than listening to developers in the area and trying to leave it in the developer's hands for the choice of the percentage of the uses.
So are you trying to tell me that an existing building that exceeds that height in the UU designated area doesn't have the right to structurally alter the building?
If it was existing when it come in prior to the UU, then it was grandfathered in.
Right, that's what I'm saying. And because of all the other things that go with UU, with parking, that type stuff, my concern is, you're giving carte blanche to somebody to come in and build a 225-foot building as a by right use with no other, and I don't know if there's kickers in it. This ordinance is pretty short. And I guess it's just a modification to the existing ordinance. It's not the whole ordinance, correct?
That's correct. I can send a redlined copy of the ordinance that we did for the modifications for the board.
Why wouldn't we consider something like a conditional use permit to do this? Because my concern is that there's no oversight. You're going from a height of 72 feet with a kicker of 28 feet based on some other things to a straight up 225 feet. That's an order of magnitude of 3 in building height. And it's just concerned that that's a order of magnitude that seems pretty quick, and because we've had some developers ask for it, I want to make sure that we are not setting ourselves up where we end up with somebody who's got existing building, and now they're going to have the potential for somebody to cut off sight distance for that building. They've got a nice view of the river. The developer buys a property in front of it. They build a 225-foot. Now they've got an obstructed view. And I'm not going to play in Dean's sandbox with the river market, but I know that we've had issues with trying to keep a certain manner with that development area there, and that most of the higher buildings we've built have been set back from that as not to obstruct rear views. I have some trepidation about this. There's not been any public input. This just got brought to my attention. what the change was on Friday when this was posted. So I hadn't seen any discussion of it, any engagement, and what it means for our whole downtown core. And I just think I'm all for trying to make things easier, but this is an order of magnitude that seems pretty carte blanche. That could impact other people, as we talked about, could be at the detriment of other property owners that are already existing. If they knew that those buildings were already approved, if they bought a condominium or a residential development that's got a view of the river, and now potentially they lose that because we've changed the ordinance with no engagement with them. That's my concern.
Director Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Collins. I'll add a little context and try to respond to Director Hines' comments. First, as the board knows, I guess 4 or 5 months ago, the mayor created the Downtown Density Task Force that I chair with a number of developers, business owners, and individuals who live and work downtown. Part of that conversation, and Jamie is part of that group, part of that conversation led to this as we were talking about bringing density back to our downtown corridor, especially with businesses leaving. I know some of us have received calls this week about businesses potentially leaving downtown. This was an opportunity for us to try to address that issue. So this was, and we worked with the planning department to try to come up with a way to help spur development and density in downtown that's going to correspond with our downtown master plan that this board approved, I guess, last year with the ARPA funds. So that's a little more of context on how we got here. As it relates to the public input, obviously our task force has been involved. This matter, just for clarity for the public, this matter did go to the Planning Commission. There was public input there. The Planning Commission voted to approve it. That's how it got to us. This also is an agenda meeting, so anyone who had concerns can show up next Tuesday and express them. I don't think there will be any based on the people I've talked to, but there is opportunity for public input. So I don't want it to assume that someone tried to sneak one past the goalie with this proposed amendment. But more importantly, the purpose of it is, I know we all care about downtown. I know it's close to Director Computer's heart, obviously Director Miller, because it's his ward, and me who live, not live, I feel like I live, I spend so much time in the Bank of America building that I should live there. I know this is important to downtown, and we have to do things to spur development, and this was an opportunity for us to do so by making this change to increase development. So I want to give that context, Mayor, and I'm happy to talk to any of my colleagues offline between now and next Tuesday to discuss it further.
And also, Director Hines, just because I'm not aware of all of the villains that got to this point, except for the fact that I know the Downtown Density Group are working diligently with many developers who've helped build downtown, like Moses Tucker, Flake and Kelly, many others that we all know who cherished the resurgence that we're seeing, but also were really the reason why we have the downtown today, and they're very supportive. Director Compuris. Oh, and also they're all a part of the Downtown Master Plan Leadership Committee. All right. Seeing no other questions.
Mayor, I have one comment on that.
I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
I think we have missed the boat, and I think you're probably going to get ready to find out. The residents of the residential towers in these areas, this is the first they're hearing of it. And they don't sit on the Downtown Development Council. It's developer heavy, I get it. I'm just telling you, so you might want to be prepared for some phone calls. And I think, as I've said with anything, it's fine if we do this, but public engagement of a structure like this, and it gives me pause when we're seeing order of magnitude of 200% increase in the allowable building height in an area that covers the entirety of downtown, in an area where we've got residents who've made substantial investments in condominiums with certain views of the area, knowing that if there's anything else going to be built that might potentially obstruct their $1 million views out of their condos, they would have an ability to input. This is a by right use. This means any developer can come in, buy a spot of land and build it. My other concern is that all of those residential buildings that were built because they were built through a different process. They were required to provide parking for their residents. In UU designation, there is no requirement for parking that I know until I see the full ordinance to address that. And I think it's short-sighted for a developer because it saves them $10 or $11 million not to have to build a parking structure as part of their development, to give them carte blanche when other developers that have been and built and people that have made investments, that was part of the investment they made. They had parking that wasn't on street and was built into the development. That's just my concern.
Yes, sir. If I can respond to that, Mayor, and I respect that concern, Director Hines. We have communicated with people who lived in the tower, not everyone, but I will say publicly, I'm an elected official at large. I get phone calls about things every day, and I welcome other phone calls about this issue. This is part of the process. This is why we talk about things at agenda meetings. This is why we have a separate meeting to vote on it with public comment opportunities. So we are following the process. So I'll just say publicly, if anyone has questions about it, I'm happy to respond. And I know Jamie and his team have worked hard on this and are supportive of it in improving density downtown. And we will be responsive to our constituents. That's all. Thanks, Mayor.
All right, seeing no other questions on these items. 21, any questions on 22 to 24? Director Computers?
Going on 24,
Yes, sir.
and I realize this is not what I'm going to talk about, but I got a 10-year summary on our insurance from the Municipal League, and we've overpaid versus claims by $1.5 million. And that could make up for a lot of drainage in a lot of different places and things like that. And I have asked some of my friends in the insurance business, and they think there are agents out there, agencies, that will insure us for the sort of thing the Municipal League is doing for less money, but will look at fire and police. I know we passed this a week ago, but I'd ask Tom to look and see if we can't find other opportunities that we can get equal protection and save a lot of money.
Thank you, Director Capiris. Ms. Jenny Bradford, and which is under HR, they would be the ones because they have that expertise. Jenny, if you'll share what's been done at the request of Director Capiris and the process of the insurance.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Board. I actually spoke with our broker today about the possibility of having two policies to cover the entire group. I asked them if they thought that it would be feasible if we could save any money, and I'm waiting to hear back from them. Initially, the quote that we got and the indications that we got were much higher than what we are currently paying for the one policy, and that was primarily on the policy that would cover the police. So I have asked them again to look into it, and I'm waiting to hear back from them now.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next week we'll have executive session as it relates to the boards and commissions and things of that nature. We'll now ask our finance team to please approach the table. As they are coming, I'm going to share a few words. As we promised, is that we would provide a draft proposed 2024 budget. Based on the last meetings that we've had with the city board, where the city department directors shared their budget requests. Again, this is a draft proposed budget. There will not be a vote on this at any point in time. Not any point in time. There won't be a vote on it today. It's not scheduled to be on next week's the next board meeting, so it gives time for board members to review and to understand what's going on in the budget and to ask questions. I am happy to report a balanced budget. The finance team of Scott Massinelli, our interim CFO, as well as Amanda Watson and Sandra Blade, our key and chief accounting leaders, have put this together alongside myself and Emily. And this has been a lot of hours. And before we even start, we can't thank enough our retiree that's still on the payroll, because she still has some additional hours left of time that she's running out, and Sarah Linehan, who has been very involved in this process to be very helpful to Scott, Amanda, and Sandra. And personally, from the bottom of my heart, I just want to share her appreciation, because this is something she didn't have to do, but she chose to do it, and we're very grateful for her leadership and getting us there as we are searching, continuing to search for the CFO. That being said, I ask the board members, as always, this is 69 pages. So if you all want to get some water and some stuff, let's get comfortable. We'll go through this, and then we'll have some highlights, and then we'll have time for questions, and then also to take this home and take time to look at it. And hopefully, if there are any questions, we'll make certain they get addressed. And the goal, because after hearing from many of you all, you would like to try to get this done earlier than usual with the holiday season. The goal is to try to get this done in December as best as possible. We would love to do it at the end of November, but definitely early December would be great, and not running up against the clock that we know that we have. That being said, I think I'm kind of filibustering right now. Make sure they're getting situated. Director Miller.
Sorry, Mayor. I just wanted to ask. I know we're going to get the chance to take a look at this. I appreciate it. Appreciate all the work. I don't know what type of questions I'm going to have today, because I'm going to get a chance to really go over this. Yeah. But in that same vein, will this be on the city's website for our public to take a look at?
It will be on the website once this meeting's over.
Thank you.
Alongside our 2023 budget that's already on the website as well, with our CAFR and things of that nature. But yes, it will be on the city website. If it's not already on now, it'll be on within an hour or two of this meeting. All right, Scott, want to get us started?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor, Board of Directors, and thank you for those introductions. I will be discussing the revenues of each fund, and Amanda here will be discussing the expenditures of each fund. We're going to start off with the general fund. General fund revenues. This is just an overview of the general fund revenues. More details are going to follow on the next pages of our larger revenues. I do want to say the total 2024 projected revenues are $257,510,221. That's about 4% over the amended budget that we did not long ago. So we've had some good growth since the amended budget. It's also about almost 6% over the original 2023 budget. So revenues of the general fund have been up, and that's a pretty good increase, growth overall for the revenues. Okay, the first one we'll go through is the property tax. The 2023 projected forecast is almost $36.5 million of property taxes. That's a 9% growth. I've been with the city 25 years, and we've never had growth that much in property taxes in 1 year. That comes from a really aggressive residential market of selling houses. Also, I think everybody who owns a home knows that in 2022 there was a 5-year reappraisal, and those assessments were way up. That's the majority of the 9% increase. So, and also one other thing, it was the new Amazon warehouse also contributed to that 9% growth. So I've contacted the Pulaski County assessor, and their projections for property taxes for next year is 4% over this year. And that's a conservative estimate of 4%. And that's the norm in property taxes, 3, 4, 5%. And obviously, our largest revenue in the general fund is sales and use tax. As you know, since the pandemic, since 2021, we've experienced above average sales tax growth. Year to date, 2023, that's 8 months, sales taxes are 8.5% over last year. That's a great growth rate. Although, one thing I do want to point out, though, after last month, they are trending down. The last month that we got, that was in October, was only 2.6% growth. And we anticipate next month what we receive in November to be even lower than that. What's happening is rising short-term interest rates are having an effect on our local economy and probably all economies. We have conservatively estimated sales tax for 2024 at 1.25% over where we're going to end up in 2023. And of the 3 major revenue sources of the general fund, the last one is franchise fees. The franchise fees projections for the electric, gas, water, and wastewater all come from the utilities. I contact the rep from each utility, and they give me their forecasts. As you know, Central Arkansas Water had a rate increase on July the 1st, 2023, and there will be another one scheduled for January the 1st, 2024. So that 2% on second line water utility, that comes from them, their estimate with their rate increase. The biggest change in franchise fee is the obvious one in the gas utility. If you look at that change of 17.6%, that's Summit Utilities. We've got information a year ago, today from a year ago, the price of natural gas has plummeted. And also, appliances are becoming more efficient, and the usage is also going down. So that 17.6% decline from Summit has really brought the overall franchise fees down about 1.5% for 2024. All right, intergovernmental funds are derived from insurance premiums and are received from the state and dedicated to our local fire and police retirement funds. As you can see, there's a nice increase of 12.25% for 2024. Our actuary has informed us that the increase is based on a new method of valuation. Has to do with shorter amortization. A lot of things I don't understand, but I do have the actuary's report. Again, this is just a pass-through revenue. All money we receive from the state goes back to lot fee to that retirement fund. So in summary, again, the general fund revenue is $257,510,000. Again, it's really nice growth, and 4% over the amended budget. And now we'll move on to expenditures. I'm sorry, I've got one more slide. Just a breakout of the 3 major revenue sources there. You can see that sales and use tax, it's usually historically 51%, but now it's 51%. It's now 56% of total general fund revenues. Property taxes coming in at 15%, and franchise fees at 13%. Those are the 3 major revenue sources.
So now we'll move to the personnel cost. This slide just shows the step and grade progressions that we do, and that's for the Fraternal Order of Police, the International Association of Firefighters, AFSCME, and 911 communications positions. Here we have our police uniform personnel increases. We have a 5% increase for all officers and an additional 4% for officers over 15 years of service. Then we increased our recruit incentives to fund 65 recruits instead of 35. And then we have an increase in the closed pension plan, which will be described on a slide.
And members of the board, the Fraternal Order of Police and the Black Police Officers Association are aware that we're sharing this information. They now have these numbers before their vote this time. So just make sure you're aware of that.
Okay. On the next slide, we have the fire uniform personnel. Per the 2-year agreement made last year, they received 6% in 2023, and they'll receive 1.75% in 2024. And then there was also an increase in the closed pension plan, which will be described on slide 18. Then on the non-uniform personnel, this includes the general street waste disposable fleet and vehicle storage funds. There's a 2% across the board salary increase, and we also raised the minimum salary of our code enforcement officers and their supervisors. And we added a recruit incentive for our emergency communications. Here we have our employee benefits. There is an estimated $347,000 increase in our personnel costs, which was included in those numbers that we've seen on the previous slides. We will continue with the buy-up options for our employees and the continuation of dental, vision, and basic life at no cost to employees for single coverage. Here you're seeing our pension rates. We are at 24% for fire and police pension and 9% for non-uniform. And here we have our APERS pension rates. There was no change on those. This shows a slight increase for our judges and the clerk's liability from $196,000 to $200,000, and a slight increase in the closed non-uniform plan from $635,000 to $665,000. And the closed police and fire pension are offset by the annual city sales tax contributions of $500,000 and other dedicated fines and fees for each plan. And this slide breaks down the monthly payments and the additional allocations, and it shows the increase for fire and police. And this slide, you're seeing that there is a decrease in the OPEB contribution for COBRA and retirees of $103,000. And a slight increase of workers' comp of $20,000. This chart shows our changes between 2022 to 2024 in the staffing for each department. Here you see executive administration has an increase of 1 from 2023 to 2024. And there's notes showing the changes that's happened in each department. Executive administration, we reclassified homeless services advocate to housing. We added an ERP manager from IT to executive administration, and we're including a communications social media manager for the 2024 budget.
Members of the board, if you'll recall, the ERP is the major system, financial enterprise system that we have to undergo.
And the next change we had was community programs. We had one of our positions reclassified from the general fund to be paid from special projects. And in IT, you see was no change in the number of staff paid from the general fund, but there was a couple reclassifications to their staffing. And on the next slide, you see in housing, we added a chief homeless officer, and then we reclassified the homeless services advocate from executive administration, which increases their staffing by 2. And in the zoo, we have a change of, we're decreasing by 2. One of the positions is now funded by a special project, and we decreased another position due to the outsourcing of the gift shop and the concessions for the zoo. Overall, the general fund personnel includes an increase of 1 from the 2023 adopted budget. Now, this slide shows the special project allocations for the staffing, and you see there was a total change of 5. The community programs, as discussed earlier, they increased 1 position being paid from special projects versus the general fund. Finance had an increase of 2. We converted 2 part-time positions for the grants division to full-time positions to be funded by grant funds. And police had a decrease of 1 on special projects, and that was moved to the general fund budget. And this also shows the zoo added 1 position to be paid from a special activity, and Public Works had an increase of 2. Overall, there was 55 positions paid by special projects and grants in the general fund and 7 associated with the street fund. Staffing for the other funds includes 435 full-time positions, which is no change from 2023. The fleet fund did receive 1 additional staff that was reclassed from the vehicle storage fund. In total, for all funds and special projects, there was 2,265 full-time positions, and that is an increase of 6 from 2023. And here is a chart showing the staffing levels of each department and the percentage of staff for the city allocated to each department. The cost of fleet labor, fuel, vehicle insurance, vehicle maintenance, and parts expenses are allocated to departments based on the number of vehicles assigned, maintenance requirements, and actual fuel usage. Parts and sublet expenses are expected to increase approximately $134,000. The fuel rate for unleaded had no change from the previous year, but the diesel rate did decrease slightly. That will decrease the citywide fuel budget by approximately $66,000. This chart shows an overview of our outside agency support. There was a change in Rock Region Metro. They are expected to decrease their daily rates, and we are allocating
That's the jail.
I'm sorry?
The jail.
Yes.
Okay, you said Rock Region.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
The regional detention support is expected to decrease by $195,000. Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts, we are expecting to allocate an additional $1.8 million for a total of $4 million. Museum of Discovery, we are allocating $208,000 for a total of $400,000. Downtown Partnership, we would like to raise by $75,000 to make $300,000 total. And Oakland Fraternal Cemetery, we would like to increase by $50,000 to $100,000. This is an overview of our debt service. Our total payments in 2024 is $4 million, which is an increase of $1.6 million from 2023 to 2024, which includes payments for 2019, 2021, and 2023 short-term notes. Okay. This chart shows expenditures by category, and there's a total of $257,510,221 in expenditures. That represents a $16.7 million increase from the 2023 original budget and an increase of 13.2 from the amended budget. The primary component of the increase is the $10.6 million in personnel costs, which takes into account the vacancy savings of $7 million. So the net increase is $10.6 million to the general fund personnel, and the vacancy savings requirement will remain the same at $7 million. And this accounts for the one additional personnel to the general fund. Here is a breakdown of the general fund net personnel cost changes from the 2023 original budget to the 2024 proposed budget. And this continues on the next slide, and you'll see the total of the $10.6 million. That is the change in the personnel. Here's a breakdown on what we are adding from the 2023 amended budget to the proposed 2024 budget. There was a $25,000 increase to the city attorney's supplies line for litigation and FOIA expenses, $11,000 for second district court for ballistic vests, laser cartridges, and lab medical supplies, including portable breathalyzer mouthpieces. There was also an increase of $1,000 to the third district court for their uniform budget, a $13,000 increase for finance training budget, $7,000 for river market supplies, and a decrease of $304,000 for the zoo due to outsourcing of concessions and gift shop. Here's an overview of our changes for our fleet, fuel, and vehicle and equipment maintenance that will be billed to each department from the fleet fund. It's a total change of $222,000. And here's, you see the changes to the general fund maintenance expenses from the amended budget to the 2024 proposed budget. Finance will have an increase of $20,000 in software contracts, and River Market has a $20,000 increase to operations. This is our proposed changes to our 2024 budget for general fund contracts. The first line is executive administration changes in general and employee benefits, property insurance, actuarially determined pension contributions, etc. And the second line, you see the first district court annual copier lease increase $6,000. Then the second district court, $4,000 per professional dues. Finance has a $49,000, $500 increase for additional contract increase for the audit. And then we have a $500,000 allocation for operational funds for the homeless village, a $400,000 allocation for parks projects and upkeep for the parks, decrease in the River Market for LRCBB's forecast of $81,000, an increase of $20,000 for police for automobile insurance, and a slight decrease in Zoo's budget for $4,000 for outsourcing of the gift shop and concessions. Here you see the changes to our utilities accounts. There was a slight change for traffic, increase of $1,400 for the second district court, and a decrease for River Market of $17,000, which was a forecast from LRCDB. And this again is an overview of our general fund debt service, and it shows the changes between 2022 to 2024's proposed budget, which was an increase of $1.6 million from 2023 to 2024. And on the next slide, we'll see a chart for the outside agency support, and that shows the changes between 2022 to 2024. And on the far right side, you'll see there was an increase of $1.9 million between the 2023 original budget to 2024 proposed budget. And on the next slide, we have the transfers out of the general fund. There is transfers out will decrease approximately $2.88 million from the 2023 amended budget, and that's a decrease of $481,000 from the original 2023 budget. The total transfers out are expected to be $12.5 million. The transfer of $194,000 to other funds represents a transfer to the street fund to offset the cost of parking enforcement. The 2024 allocation, contingency allocation of $1.275 million is an increase of $75,000 to bring the allocation to approximately 0.5% of revenues before transfers in. And here is a chart of our allocations to our special projects. I'll go over the changes from 2023 to 2024. On line number 2, there is our annual fleet replacement. This allocation includes $1.1 million for our lease payments, and then an additional $1.142 million for vehicle replacement needs. And that's a decrease of $282,000 from 2023 to 2024. And then we have a slight decrease in facility improvements for general building maintenance of $2,000. And then we have a $235,000 for an allocation for city branding. And now we have a $25,000 allocation for sister cities. And on the bottom of this slide, you'll see there's a list of 2023 one-time project allocations that will not be funded for the 2024 budget. And on the next slide, there was a list of 2022 one-time projects that will not be funded in the 2024 budget. This is a breakdown of our grant match. We kept the grant match at $550,000. There was no change from 2023 to 2024. Here is a chart of our expenditures by category. You can see there's 74% of our expenditures is in personnel. And then we have 15% in others, 5% in transfer, and 6% in outside agency. The police, fire, and 911 personnel is $144 million, which is 76% of the total personnel. Here is a list of our expenditures by department, and this shows you the 2022 actual through the 2024 proposed. And the first line is a executive administration, but this is for the general and employee benefits, including the outside agency contributions, special project allocations, and other transfers out, debt service, property insurance, vacancy savings, vacation and sick payouts, and the employee benefits division, which includes actuarially determined pension contributions, worker comp, OPEB, and other general employee costs. The second line for executive administration is the actual division and their department's cost. On the next slide, you'll see.
And just to make sure everyone's aware that that number represents the 37 folks that are part of all of the executive administration and the 2% increase in their salaries. So that's, make sure everyone knows that.
And this slide shows the second half of that chart, showing the rest of the department's expenditures. And here is a breakdown of the line 1 executive administration, and it shows that there was a decrease of $133,000 in personnel, and that represents the changes to OPEB, workers' comp, and other general employee costs. The increase to contracts include property, cyber, legal defense, insurance, and other increases. The debt service and outside agency allocations are also represented in this fund, and the decrease to transfers to special projects. And on this slide is the executive administration, their division, and their department. There was $338,000 change from the 2023 original budget, and that includes the across-the-board 2% salary increase and the addition of a new communication social media manager position. The changes in the fleet fund were discussed previously.
Just for a reminder, that 2% doesn't go to Tom or Bruce's position or even myself. That's done through the city board.
And here's a chart of the general fund expenditures by department. It shows the percentages of the expenditures, 35% for police, 24% for fire, et cetera. And the police, fire, 911 communications, and employee benefits, outside agency contributions, debt service, and transfers out make up 75% of the general fund budget. And here's a summary of our general fund budget. We have $257,510,221 in revenues, and we're matching those in expenditures for a balanced budget.
Okay, that's a lot to absorb, so I'll move on to the street fund revenues. Let me back this up a little bit. 2024 street fund revenues are projected at approximately $26,130,000, which is $694,000 above the amended budget. As I mentioned earlier, property taxes are projected to increase 4% from the 2023 actuals. One component of the largest revenue here is the gas tax turnback. There's 4 components of the gas tax turnback. One component is the half-cent sales tax for the roads that was permanent in 2020. It's actually trending lower. This is kind of very ironic. For the first time, the number of gallons, because cars are so efficient, the number of gallons of gasoline that are consumed are actually going down. And so that one component is actually trending lower, gas tax, of the gas tax turnback. That's it.
And the street fund expenditures is expected to be $25.2 million, and they are expected to have a net income of $895,000 available for grant match, street and drainage projects, street fund capital equipment needs, emergency street and drainage repairs, and other eligible street and drainage projects. A couple highlights as noted in the personnel. ASME personnel will continue step and grade progression. In addition, all full-time employees will receive a 2% across-the-board salary increase. The fleet cost and the transfers out. The fleet cost was discussed on the previous slide. The transfers out are reflected on the next slide. The street fund transfers out is expected to be $2.8 million, including funding for vehicle and equipment replacement, continuation of right-of-ways, mowing, and re-entry projects. The allocation for administrative overhead has been increased slightly at $47,000.
Okay, we'll segue into the waste disposal fund and look at the revenues of the waste disposal. Total projected revenues of the waste disposal for 2024 is $25,712,800. The largest revenue source here is the sanitation fees. The 2023 forecast for sanitation fees is approximately $22.3 million. We had the reason you see the negative number over there, we had the 2023 original budget way too high. We anticipated too much from sanitation fees. Sanitation fees have been fairly flat. That's why you see the negative numbers. But what's made up for sanitation fees is the landfill fees. We've had other cities come to our landfill, and each year they've increased since the pandemic.
And here we see the waste disposal expense forecast. We are expected to be $25.7 million in expenses. That's a change of $227,000 from the 2023 budget. The increase in personnel is attributed to the step and grade progression and the 2% salary increase across the board. The changes in fleet was described on a previous slide. Closure and post-closure is forecasted based on tonnage deposited to the landfill. The waste disposal bonds were retired in 2022, so there's no allocation for that. And the transfers out are shown in detail on the next slide. Transfers out include funding for environmental youth and continuation of the anti-litter programs. The litter pickup allocation was eliminated due to excess funds already available for 2024. The administrative overhead allocation to the general fund was reduced to ensure the waste disposal fund remains balanced.
Moving on to the fleet fund, looking at their revenue forecast. Sorry, right there. Total revenues of the fleet are $18,575,988. You'll notice that the negative number for fleet labor costs are due to decreases in labor costs associated with fleet billing. As mentioned earlier, the rate for diesel is going down a little bit, and therefore decreasing the fuel cost billings by approximately $62,100.
And here we have the Fleet Services Fund expense forecast. We are expecting $18.5 million in expenses. That will match the Fleet Services revenue forecast. The increases in supplies and contracts are primarily associated with vehicle parts cost and contracted services for engine replacement, drive lines, hydraulic systems, and similar. The decrease in fuel was discussed on the previous slide.
Okay, now we got vehicle storage fund, looking at those revenues. As you can see, 2024 is projected to be $2,266,000. That's up $222,000. There's three main revenue sources of the vehicle storage. They are the storage fees, the wrecker fees, and the auction fees, and they are all tied together. They tend to go up and down together depending on the number of tows that end up at vehicle storage. And also, what's a really strong revenue is people leave their cars and they don't come and pick them up, and the auction sales, those are exceeding budget.
And here's the vehicle storage expense forecast, they're anticipated to have net income of $57,000, and their total expenses are expected to be $2.2 million. The personnel cost expense reflects the 2% salary increase and the reclass of one position from vehicle storage fund to the fleet fund.
Okay, I believe this might be our last fund, the parking garage fund. 2023 parking garage revenues are expected to end the year at 2023, they're going to end the year almost at $3 million. So what we've got for 2024 budget is just a slight increase of $3,193,000 total, $3,193,300. The Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau, they actually provide the forecast for a lot of these revenues. They know they run both of these parking garages. And so they provide that for the State House and the River Market garages. You'll notice that daily parking has gone up significantly. The budget they gave us revenue for daily parking is $682,000. That is for the installation of technology and software. We've seen it since they put in the technology. I don't know how it brings more people in there, but we've already seen it for 2023, and their projection is a sharp increase in daily parking down at the River Market.
And the parking garage fund expense forecast is $1.3 million for expenses, which would make a $1.8 million in net income. The parking garages will continue to be operated by Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau. Expenses for the parking deck will decrease from the original 2023 budget by $378,000. And net income will remain sufficient to fund debt service on the parking garage bonds. And on the next slide, we see a summary of all funds. This shows the general fund, waste disposal fund, and fleet fund are balanced. Street fund has a net income of $895,000, vehicle storage a net income of $57,000, and the parking garage fund a net income of $1.8 million. That is a total of $2.7 million of net income for restricted usage. And here's a chart of our 2024 revenue forecast by fund, which is a total of $333 million. And on the next slide is the chart of our expected expenditures, which is $330 million. And that is the last slide.
Thank you so much, Amanda, Scott, Miss Sandra, and of course, Miss Sarah, who's watching online somewhere, I'm sure. But just want to commend you all and working to get this done alongside myself and Emily. We're very grateful for all the hours that have gone into putting together a balanced budget. Members of the board, what you have before us is a balanced budget with a moderately flat growth, which we're very conservative as we move forward with our city operations, and very grateful for that. Again, as I shared, we've been in discussions with the police union. They were aware that these numbers would be shown today. They have these numbers, have had it for at least a week or so, and they're waiting 2 weeks before they have their formal vote. The IAFF and the Black Firefighters Association, they already had their 2-year contract in place where they received 6% last year and built in a 1.75%. The police had a 1-year contract last year. I think their increase was 7.9. The increase this year is 5%. And so we feel very positive based on what we've been hearing from negotiations on that particular front with the police, who are currently finalizing that contract from that standpoint. Now I want to open the floor for any questions. Again, this is a draft proposed budget. It is balanced. Based on the feedback that you all shared, we believe we've, with the monies that we had available, we're able to address many of your concerns. You all reached out to us and shared the information, and very excited about this budget that we're sharing with you today. Vice Mayor Webb.
Thank you. Thank you both for this presentation, and also to former Director Linehan. Obviously, there's a lot to absorb, and hopefully we'll have some questions for next week. So just one quick question. On
yes, ma'am.
Page talking about the 2024 personnel salary progression, where it says recruit incentives will remain at 10,000 but increase from 35 to 65 recruits. And this may not be for you all really, but is that based on that we really believe we're going to have 65 recruits next year? So maybe this.
Yes, ma'am.
You, Emily.
Number did come from the police department.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions, members of the board? Any concerns? Any questions or concerns?
Mayor, I'll jump in there just quickly. I think is the plan, I think I asked this last week, but I didn't know if this is what we're going to do. Are we going to have opportunity to bring this up each week, or what's the plan for the ongoing conversation?
Yes, the plan is, again, we intentionally didn't want to bring this in ordinance form. We wanted to get this before you so you guys can take home. It's going to be online if you have any questions. From a balance standpoint, to keep it balanced, we got to do certain things, but from what we've heard from you all, for instance, we heard from members of the board, we wanted to get to $4 million for the Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts. That's in here. We know that we wanted to increase funding to Museum of Discovery as well as Downtown Partnership, who experienced cuts since the pandemic. We've got them all to the levels they were prior to the pandemic and got them at that standpoint. We also, Director Wyrick, I know you've been a champion for sister cities. We were able to get that included. We know Director Wyrick and every board member has been very concerned about the salaries for our code enforcement officers. That's included. We were able, one, as we all know, police and fire, 51% of our personnel and 76% of our personnel costs. We have very favorable terms with both of them right now. Clearly, with fire, we're going into negotiation with fire next year, but I believe the police will be very favorable to the amount of dollars that they're receiving. From that standpoint, as it relates to our parks department, we're seeing an increase in parks funding from the first time we had it in the amended budget, but in a true budget as it relates to, as we move forward, we're seeing some increase there. Clearly it's not where we really want it to go, but we also know some of the decisions we've made with Arkansas Museum of Fine Art and Museum of Discovery, which are all important as well. We were able to get that adjusted inside of this with a moderately flat growth budget. So we've heard many things from you all that's been included with the amount of money that we have, understanding that our personnel costs is really kind of serves as a governor for a lot of things we can do when it comes to police, fire, 911. Director Adcock, were you motioning?
I thought I'd wait till later.
Yes, ma'am. We'll come back before you next week, hopefully with some more questions. If not, again, we hope to pass this. I know how you guys are. We don't like to be here at the last minute in December, so you can't be, Director. Let's try to get it done soon. We can get it done. All right. We won't belabor the point. If you have any questions, please reach out on this balanced budget. Thank you. Motion to adjourn? Oh, let's agenda meeting tonight. Meeting adjourned.